Quade Green, Hamir Wright, and Travis Rice. All right, so getting into the first segment, the position preview for next season for the football team. And it's going to be the inside linebacker group, which I think it's a little weaker than the coaches especially want to believe and want the fans to think, especially with what Lake said at his press conference a while back when he announced Gregory as the defensive coordinator. He kind of talked about the linebacker group as being a strength of this Husky squad in the past and praised Gregory for it. However, looking at the numbers for the inside linebackers, which really the run game and inside linebacker productions kind of correlates very closely, as an inside linebacker's job is really to step up, fill the gap, make the tackle at the line of scrimmage, and stop the other team's run game. So a good measure of a team's linebacker is kind of the defensive yards per game allowed on the ground. And for the Huskies this past season, albeit in just the 4 games that they had, the overall numbers weren't very good. In 2020, they allowed 161 yards per game on the ground. And this might have been good enough for 5th in the Pac-12. However, it's not really up to the standards that the Huskies had been performing to in past years. Looking at 2019, they only gave up 129 yards per game, which is 32 yards less. And each year going back, it gets lower and lower. In 2018, they only gave up 116 yards per game. And then in 2017 was their best year, really the peak was only 101 yards per game on the ground. So the rush defense has just continuously gotten worse and worse as the years have progressed from 2017 onwards. And that's kind of because they haven't really recruited very well at the inside linebacker position. And looking at this year's number again of 161 yards per game, if you actually look into that number and each individual game, because there was only 4 games total. So you have 3 games where they struggled immensely. Against Oregon State, 167 yards they gave up on the ground. Against Utah, it was 215. And then against Stanford, the last game, 191. The one game where the Husky run defense really showed up was against Arizona. But really, every defense stepped up against Arizona because they struggled immensely on offense. So overall, the Huskies' rush defense, when they were playing a decent or average team on the ground, they gave up huge holes and gave up big runs. Part of this issue is when your clear-cut best player at a position group is a walk-on player, then that signifies to me that you're not recruiting well enough at that position. Now, that's no knock on Edifon Ulofoshio. He's a great player. He's clearly he got some great recognition after the season. But I'm really just saying that Washington should have been able to recruit a top-ranked player like a 4-star. And they have a couple 4-stars, but they just didn't produce, I guess. Maybe even a 5-star Washington could have recruited. As really in recent years, they've had success going to 4 New Year's 6 bowl games in the past 5 or so seasons it is. So the Huskies do this year have another 4-star linebacker joining the group, and that's Will Latu. Latu is a 4-star out of Bethel, Washington. And I do like Latu a lot. I think he can develop into a good linebacker and be successful for the Huskies. But at the moment, he'll probably have to take a year or 2 to really develop his game and develop into a good college football linebacker. Now, he's got okay size, 6'2", 230 pounds. And in college, you can be very successful at that size. I think a personal preference, I think he might want to bulk up just a bit, get to 235, 240, and be a stout run defender for this Huskies. And that's really what they're missing at that position. At the inside linebacker position, the Huskies kind of have some good speed, some good side-to-side across the field guys in Sermon and Ulofoshio, who they're also both 230 pounds. Now, Ulofoshio definitely stood his ground more in the run game than Sermon, but both you could look at clips of them getting beat by the opposing team in the run game. And Sermon's biggest problem with this was, from what I watched, is he would miss tackles, make the wrong read, and then end up getting cut off from the running back by one of the pulling offensive linemen. Now, Ulafosio did great in a lot of instances. He had a bunch of tackles, led the team in tackles by far. But a piece of critique for him is really just getting to the hole, meeting the running back at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. As often was the case, Ulafosio he'd be left on an island for the running back 5 yards down or 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. So he wouldn't be getting up the line of scrimmage and making contact with the running back until they've already got a full head of steam and they end up getting 6+ yards on the carry. I don't know what was the reason for this. He wasn't trusting his eyes, maybe. Something just wasn't going right. As in any game, you could really point this out of Ulafosio making the tackle, but then you see like it's 1st and 10, they run it, next thing you know, it's 2nd and 3 after a big gain. Now, Latu, as a true freshman, I could easily see him earning some reps. And as at this linebacker core by no means is deep. It's got a really just the first two, Sermon and Ulafosio. I mean, Sermon even could be replaced if one of these other guys step up in spring practice. But overall, the linebacker core isn't the deepest. And if Latu develops quickly and has a good practice, spring practice and fall camp, then he could get some early snaps in at linebacker. But with this being Ulafosio and Sermon's second year together, I mean, there's hope that they can develop a good chemistry and can work in unison more this upcoming season and really shore up some of those shortcomings of this past season for that position group. Last week, I looked at the defensive back position group and talked about how they're the clear strong point from the team last season, as well as looking like another clear strong point of this team for this upcoming season. And now looking at this inside linebackers position group, they were probably a clear weak point from last year. And with no huge instant difference making